Welcome to Melt University's 2020 summer program. This year, our virtual intern program will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Here's your host, President and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome, students of Melt University Virtual Summer 2020. We've got a really great guest for you today. Honored and delighted to have one of the nation's preeminent media content marketing executives in the planet, Jonathan Katz, the founder, president, and CEO of the Katz Networks. And in case you don't know what that is, it's an American media company with a giant portfolio of national over-the-air, what we call OTA, television networks. He founded Bounce TV. He has brought the fabled Court TV out of the mothballs, Grit TV, Escape TV, and Laff. And his networks reach more than 90% of all U.S. households and among the fastest growing in the television industry today. Welcome, Jonathan Katz, to Melt University.
Thank you, Vinny. I tell you what, I got to live up to a pretty hefty introduction there.
That's a big introduction for you, but we really appreciate your participation today. You have been a great speaker and presenter to our kids for many summers, sharing your knowledge and wisdom about many career opportunities in the broadcast and content and cable and over the air and other streaming platforms. And I think today you're going to share a lot of tremendous wisdom and words with our kids. And we're very fortunate that we've been able to evolve Melt University into a virtual format where we can share your wisdom, not only just with the kids that we would normally have in the room, but for thousands of kids across the country. But let's sort of start from the beginning. You were born and raised in, as I understand it, Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, and your father was a broadcast executive as well. So you sort of had this in your blood and your veins and your DNA from an early age, correct?
Correct. I really actually did grow up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I kind of grew up on campus. My dad taught, of all things, broadcasting, started with film and then moved into TV. My mom had her doctorate in linguistics and taught English. And so I was on that campus before I could walk.
Wow. I really actually did not realize that the depth of the roots in Tuscaloosa and the University of Alabama.
And what he did was a lot of not just teaching TV production, and there's thousands of folks who are in the industry today that took his classes, but he also produced for local call it local TV stations, including PBS. And so he did a lot of productions. And so I can remember running the teleprompter as a kid and had a stopwatch hanging around my neck and holding up cue cards, and so it was kind of in the DNA from the get-go.
So you developed, one thing that we talk to our kids about a lot, Jonathan, is you have this particular passion for something, and pursue your passion with zeal. If somebody's trying to tell you that you shouldn't, or tell you that, no, you shouldn't, or you should go here, what advice would you give to our kids today about pursuing your passion and your professional passion and what's in your heart and how that can drive your career success?
Terrific question. Figure out what you love to do, what makes you happy, what you're interested in, and then take any job at any pay that gets you anywhere near the path to get you there. It is a very long road, and the folks listening to this have so much time ahead of them, and there's so many different ways that they can get to the top of whatever the field is they're interested in. But you got to just start and start at the bottom and do it all with energy and passion.
So that's what we also talk about, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on in this podcast. But you got to get your foot in the door. you've got to gain that experience. You've got to build those relationships. You've got to build that network. And so, we talk a lot about the instant gratification society, and it's all going to come to you immediately. But to your point, before all of this gigantic success, you spent over 2 decades, 20 years yourself working in local television, and you basically ran the gamut of experience, whether it's production, promotion, programming, and running TV stations. Talk about that first. We talk about a lot about path. We talk a lot about career path. Talk about sort of those steps and stages of you beginning, even though you were very steeped in the DNA and being around it, you also knew you had to plot your own path and plot your career path and pay those dues. So sort of talk about that 20-year progression.
Sure. Look, as usual, it's relationships and luck, and then you got some skill in there. On the former, because my dad was in TV and knew a lot of folks, it just so happens that we were 3 doors down from the local CBS news anchor who lived in our neighborhood. And before I even had my license, she said, "You want a job at the TV station?" And of course, the answer was yes. And so at 16, and I'm pretty sure that I wrecked my car several times in doing this. Before I really knew how to drive, I had a camera and a unit, and my job was to cover spot news. So, accidents, crimes, fires, you name it. I was on the road all hours of the night and day shooting news, and then eventually was asked to do some writing, ended up as a producer and editor at that same CBS affiliate in Tuscaloosa. And then the progression was to just keep at it. So that actually was in high school. And in college, I would take classes in the morning, and then I'd drive to Birmingham, and I was the production manager of the Fox affiliate there. So it was a very long day, but when you're 19, 20, 21, you've got the energy for it. Mm-hmm. Graduated Alabama, ended up as a promotion producer in Tampa, then went to become a promotion manager in Charlotte, then came back to Tampa to run programming and promotion at the TV station where I worked previously. And local television, I will tell you, it's a terrific learning ground, proving ground, but it translates to anything, and it really is be willing to accept any role and be fantastic at it and work night and day at it, and then people will give you new opportunities. Well, so that was kind of the. Go ahead.
Well, no. So what I'm saying is that so you talk about even geographically, you were willing to go where you needed to go to pursue that opportunity and pursue that growth, basically no matter really where it was.
That's exactly right. And coming from you and me, it's important for us to tell them, take chances while you're young, but make educated decisions. If you want to move to New York because that's where your dream is, do it now when you're not married and you own virtually nothing. But do the research, figure out how much it's going to cost, how many roommates, are you going to need? Can you survive eating ramen noodles? But now is the time to jump in and not be shy about living anywhere to get that start in whatever the business is you're looking for.
Do you feel like New York is still sort of the place, the pandemic and things notwithstanding, but if you're a young person, do you still think it's the place to, we talk about a lot, getting your knees skinned and getting thrown off the saddle. And to your point, while you're young and you're flexible and you don't have the family responsibilities, is New York the place to be? Is it LA? Are there new places now? Nashville's red hot. Obviously, Atlanta's red hot. Where are some of these geographics that young kids might want to migrate to?
I don't have a definitive answer on that because it really depends on what you want to do. I mean, we're having this conversation with our businesses based in Atlanta, but I really think it does. It is important for people to realize that there are terrific places to live, to work, to eventually raise a family, et cetera. And it may not be New York or LA, but if you're in my example, if you're in media, then New York is an amazing place to be, or advertising, or PR. And it's because not only are you exposed to so much because there's so many brands and businesses based there, but it's possible to move both horizontally and vertically in your career in one city. And that's really what those cities give you is a incredible amount of flexibility over the course of your career, depending on the area that you're in.
Well, and I think you're right. I think it makes a lot of sense. And so you spent 2 decades grinding it out, local television, being everything that you could do, learning everything you could do in the operation of a television station. And so then you evolved to a major national brand, CNN, the cable news network. Tell us about that progression and that path. How did that happen? And then talk about the richness of working for such a vaunted brand as CNN. Then you evolved to Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting worldwide. Talk about that experience working, because Ted Turner was obviously a maverick entrepreneur. He saw the vision of cable news and cable television before anybody else really actually did. Talk about the richness of that experience.
So, so Vinny, you brought it up a little while ago, which is relationships and networks, and it is so valuable for our listeners to understand that the world is a really round place, and anybody you're dealing with today may be somebody who's in a position to help you or hire you in the future. And so I was at a TV station in Tampa, had a mutual friend with a woman who was running news gathering and sales for CNN, and she was looking for a head of marketing. And so this mutual friend said, you know what, you need to give Jonathan a call. And so they reached out, and this was unique in that, I'd had enough years doing a lot of things in television, but I certainly understood the local mindset, local revenue, local programming, and they needed somebody who could be a bridge to help communicate with local TV stations who were CNN affiliates and were really the bulk of news gathering there. And so I joined as VP of marketing for that division of CNN and spent about 3 years there helping to kind of build the affiliate base, kind of project that value message to our local affiliates, of which I think now there's probably 1,000 CNN affiliates. Back then there were 400 or 500. But in that process of working at CNN Center on one side of Atlanta for Ted Turner, the other side of Atlanta, which was the entertainment group, I would go visit on occasion, making presentations about CNN to those folks. And I caught the eye of the guy who had been running both as COO, a guy named Steve Heyer, who I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, Steve reached out and he said, I need somebody to come up as a number 2 in programming acquisitions. And so I moved from the news group to the entertainment group, spent a year as a number 2, and then it turns out my boss retired, and I ended up running programming, planning, and acquisitions for all of Turner Broadcasting. So TBS, TNT, bought the cartoons for Adult Swim and the sitcoms for TBS and classics for TCM, and did that for about 10 years. And that was a whole nother world of relationships and Hollywood studios. And we used to buy about $1 billion worth of programming a year. So it was a fascinating job.
Well, and I want to go back just a little bit, because you touch on something that's really important. And during this summer, we're going to continue to make this point to our students, is that everything you do is only as important as you make it. So wittingly or unwittingly, every presentation that you would go over and make at Turner Broadcasting was sort of, in its own way, a job audition. Because over time, as you impress Steve Heyer and others within those executive ranks, over time they became convinced that, hey, we need this guy on our team. So we want to impress on these kids that whether it's a job interview or whether it's a resume submission or whether it's their actual resume, and Jonathan, I'm shocked, and I'm sure you see it too. We get these solicitations for jobs all the time, and they don't even tell anything about themselves while they're trying to audition for a job or send a resume in. And that's a signal to employers that, hey, if you're not going to make the job attempt that important, then how would you be as an employee making other things important? So talk about every time you would go make that presentation, it was like the Super Bowl to you. You didn't know it was an audition, but you were putting your best effort into every presentation that you made to these people that ultimately you went to work for and then evolved as the main boss. Talk about that a little bit.
I appreciate that, and Vinny, you were totally on today. What you're describing is the fact that we are all salespeople, no matter what your job is, and whether you're trying to find a job or you have a job and you're looking for the next job. Everything is sales and marketing, and everything is important. The font you use on the resume, the paper quality, what you turn in, what you write, what you say, how you dress, everything is an element in creating and selling the brand that is you. And so you are totally right in that. The fact that I had 20 years of marketing and positioning local TV station brands, which translated into marketing and positioning a news gathering brand, and the way that those presentations were made, and the way sales pitches were delivered, then translated into a different kind of opportunity. So you are correct. Everything matters, and it's important for listeners to know that the energy that they have, the passion they have, the hunger they have in any conversation, especially looking for a job, is critical. You are trying to bring people aboard, no matter what the job is, that you want to spend time with every day, who you would be proud to have represent your company. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to flip that into one other thing, because you mentioned it as well when you talked about people presenting for jobs. Everyone needs to realize it's not about you. It's about what you can do for the company that you're pitching. And mm-hmm. it requires some thought and some work, but you've got to get past I, and get to what do they need? What are the benefits you can provide? And again, everybody's in sales from the moment that you turn around and you try to find the first job.
Well, the couple things. I think that you must have been reading my emails, because you hit the title of my new book is The Brand That Is You, Building Your Brand You. So you hit on this. We are telling these kids all summer, you've got to look at yourself as a brand. What do you want those brand attributes to be? What do you want those visuals to represent yourself or your family as people see them in social media and LinkedIn? And to your point, it's not about you anymore. It's what value that you can bring to that organization or that person or that boss or that company. And you need to be prepared to explain that value. So I think you've hit on something really, really big here. And so tell me what it takes to get your attention if somebody is reaching out to you. Give us some tricks of the trade, because we're going to continue to talk about that. This summer, I always say the resume is sort of like a blind date. You want to show enough, or you want to put enough positive energy out there to get that attention. But as a person that has started many huge successful television networks, and you've got Court TV back out of the mothballs as well. So guys, if you're listening today, there's going to be a lot of tremendous opportunities with Kate's broadcasting and his affiliations with Scripps and all those guys. But what gets your attention if you're getting a cold solicitation from somebody who's found you through this podcast, from a resume or the subject line of the email? What's one of your favorite tricks that captures your attention?
I'm going to say, just as a generality, common ground. And common ground can be so many things. Common ground could be that somebody has discovered that we actually have an opening and need something. Common ground could be that they figured out who we have a relationship with that they might have a relationship with. Common ground could be they're a graduate of the University of Alabama, or they're a big fan of Melt. And there's so many different ways to do it, but if you don't find some common ground and some way to connect, then your cold call really is cold, because then the only thing that's really in discussion is instead of, as you put it, it's I. It's what do they need, as opposed to what they might be able to bring to a conversation.
Well, you absolutely are reading off of our script, because I call it common ground. So I tell the kids, I'm like,
this is why I'm a huge Vinny fan. Do you understand?
No, we're totally in simpatico. So I tell these kids, I'm like, LinkedIn is the greatest networking tool of all time. In the old days, I had to go to the Auburn Library and look up encyclopedias and white pages or a resource or reference guide. Maybe I would find the correct information. These kids possess this power in their hands. So, for instance, students, if you're studying Jonathan's LinkedIn bio, you would be able to know everything that we've talked about his success today. You would be able to parlay that into the subject line of the email. Dear Mr. Katz, always be formal. Roll Tide, congratulations on your major success. I would like to learn more, or I see there's an account executive job opening, and here's why I would bring value to your organization. Talk about the value of using LinkedIn as the ultimate networking tool. So if a kid sees me and you, that we're friends, you could say, hey, I'm a friend of Vince Thompson's, or I'm a friend of Jonathan Katz, and I would like to apply for this job. So talk about that value, because LinkedIn is the ultimate professional networking tool now. And we're going to beat these kids on it all summer over it.
I got to tell you, I mean, it's not just LinkedIn. I hate to truly date myself. It's being able to use the internet. I mean, when we were getting out of college, there was no internet, and certainly LinkedIn is like the biggest, fastest shortcut that anybody could possibly give you. I will tell you that when we look to hire, especially something that might be skill specific, that we are doing the term searches in LinkedIn for folks who either have it as an interest or have it as a current position. And so the inverse totally needs to be true, that, to your point, that you can create magically an interaction or connection just by connecting dots on folks who are related on LinkedIn. It's invaluable.
Well, that's the thing too, is that if you have the ability, you can see who we're linked into one another. Or I like to say, it's also, it's the greatest professional Rolodex that you could find. We also talked to the kids, and you hit it on the common ground, that mining and trolling the alumni of the various institutions that we each attended to find that common ground. So anytime I'll get an email that says War Eagle in the subject matter, A, I have that emotional connection to that person, but B, that is showing that signal that they've done their homework and their research. And so segue into, if you were in your father's shoes today and you were a professor at the University of Alabama, we like to say that the campus is the greatest professional laboratory that there will ever exist for the students. Where are some places the kids should be looking for opportunities to pad that resume, to build that experience, to show that initiative, in your opinion?
Well, I want to start with leveraging your teachers and professors, if I may, which is, if the students who are listening, put some context in this, they realize that every professor of every class sees a different group come through year after year. And so you can imagine the numbers of people that they see, and the odds are there are plenty of those folks who are in professional positions to actually help students. It is meaningful, and I just got one of these last week. when you get a note from a professor at your school. So in this case, it was a professor in the School of Communication at Alabama who said very simply, and I didn't know the professor, but it didn't matter, that she had a student who was interested in television, and would I be willing to do a quick call or informational interview? And that answer was yes. And am I going to do that for every cold call? No, because there's not enough hours in the day. But to your point, Vince, when you've got that emotional connection to a school, you're willing to do more. And if students don't take advantage of that connection with a teacher and build that relationship to help them, I just think that's a big lost opportunity.
That is such an important thing. And the crazy thing is that's the lowest hanging fruit for any student, is that teacher, that professor, those career days and the career development office, particularly the challenges that many kids face in the College of Liberal Arts now. It's such a giant scrum for those opportunities. And now with so many marketing services people out of work because of the COVID-19, my theory is it's going to further push down the entry-level students because there are more qualified people that are willing to take lesser opportunities now. And so whatever our newbies and our new graduates face now, they're going to have to really, really dig deep to really, to your point, stand up and above that crowd. And so as we start to wrap up today's wonderful Melt You podcast, Jonathan, we kind of like to do a little bit of a speed round. So the first one is, what's the biggest obstacle you faced professionally, and how did you overcome
it? The biggest obstacle was raising money for the first network and my first entrepreneurial venture. And the way I overcame it was perseverance. And literally, as you should overcome any obstacle, you got to will your way through it. You got to be willing to put in every hour of every day and everything you've got to get through whatever that obstacle is.
Well, and you just hit on another big one, is that I tell these kids, I'm like, this job search is not going to be a linear path. And it's going to be, people say, what business are you in? I say, I'm in the rejection business. Get used to saying that, but NO is only the first two letters of not yet, not no. You're gonna, and don't take it personal. You just, to your point, you probably got told no in your fundraising process to raise your capital for your television networks many times. And although it may have been discouraging, you never quit. You kept grinding, correct?
Correct. All you need is one yes. So take all the no's you can get and learn from every single one of them.
So in your professional world, you've been around a lot of big name movie stars and celebrities, and so who's your favorite one that you've met, and who's on the bucket list of whom you haven't met?
Well, it's a good question. And not to name drop, I was most impressed with Steven Spielberg, who I met at the time working for Turner Broadcasting, and he was putting together the first initial special effects of the first Transformers movie, and I had a chance to watch some of that with him, and I was quietly thinking to myself, how does his brain, which is so big, fit in that head of his? On the bucket list, gosh, nothing comes to mind, but I'm sure there are a ton of talented people that I would love to meet and be able to have conversations with.
Well, I would assume I would be on your bucket list, but you've already met me, so you can sort of you can check that off. But being a TV programmer, you got to have a favorite show out there right now. You got to have a favorite stream. So short of your own personal networks, which are many and vast, what's JK currently watching these days, and what do you recommend the kids watch?
These days they've probably seen a lot more than I have, but right. What I will say is that I tend to gravitate toward action, fantasy, superheroes. So you can guess between between Netflix and Disney Plus and Game of Thrones on HBO. I've done all that. The Witcher is great. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there. My wife loves or is just getting into Schitt's Creek, which I hadn't watched, and now I think is really, really well done. But again, so much good stuff and so little time.
Well, to your point, I mean, it's so much good stuff out there, and I understand that Schitt's Creek is very popular among the demographic of our listeners and our students today. But in closing, this is so wonderful. We appreciate you sharing your time and your words of wisdom. We encourage you students of Melt University, Virtual Melt University, to reach out to Jonathan on LinkedIn, to follow him on LinkedIn, and to read all the major innovative things that he's doing. Because if you may not remember, but Court TV for a long time was a tremendous groundbreaking channel and required viewing. So it's really been an honor to have you on today. We thank you for your words of wisdom. So Jonathan Katz, the founder, president, CEO of Katz Network, thank you for joining us, Jonathan, today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.